None of it made sense to me. I felt like a freak. I thought I was the weirdest person in the world. I thought if anyone ever finds this out, you know, they're gonna shoot me or do something, I don't know, because it seems so terrible.
It shaped who I was for many years. It shaped how I dealt with people. It shaped how I looked at myself. I was repulsed when I looked in the mirror.
My mother had long flowing hair to her shoulder, and she has 5 sisters, and they all had long flowing hair to their shoulders. So in my case, everybody was like, what's wrong with her hair? How come it's not long and flowing to her shoulders like everybody else's? And, you know, everybody just thought my mother didn't know how to take care of my hair.
You want to see?
You want to see
reality?
Sure. Well, actually, here, let me get it.
Here's the public me, the professional me, the socialite me, the everything me, and then here's kind of the real me in here.
Do you want to stop pulling your hair?
That's a hard one to answer. That's why it's hard, you know. Yeah, I'd like to stop pulling my hair, but it feels good to do it.
Trichotillomania. I had to say it a few times just to get it off my tongue.
Trichotillomania is a problem that many people have. We don't know what causes it, but it basically is repeated and persistent pulling out of one's hair.
I hate mania. When I first heard that, I just had to keep saying it over and over and over and over again until I, you know, mania, mania, mania. I hate that word.
We don't really know how common trichotillomania is. There's some indications that about somewhere between 1% and 3% of the population have trichotillomania, which would mean that it's a disorder that is much more common than we could have ever thought.
We could just say TTM and just
Mr. Trickster.
The numbers fall somewhere between about 4 million and maybe as many as 15 million Americans. And we suspect that proportion exists throughout other cultures as well. So a lot of people pull hair.
I tried to get help from doctors who basically, A, you know, knew nothing about it, B, were not interested in finding out anything about it, and C, you know, gave me Valium.
The study of trichotillomania is just in its infancy. There are very few places in the country that even have doctors or psychologists that know anything about trichotillomania or anything more than very superficial information on how to treat it.
I'm Jennifer Raikes. I'm 31 years old and live in New York City. For the last 20 years, I've had what you might call a bad habit. I've spent most of my life trying to understand why, and trying to stop. I don't pull my head hair, just my eyelashes and eyebrows. As you can see, they're all there now. Seems like something one could take for granted, but it takes a lot of work for me to keep them, and luck. Sometimes the habit goes into hibernation, but mostly I fight the urge to pull them out every day. Even if my pulling was worse, though, you'd probably never notice. Most of us with trich live lives of stealth and subterfuge.
People in polite society can talk about hemorrhoids and bunions, but you can't go out in polite society today and say, you know what, I pull my eyebrows, I have no eyelashes, and I have a bald spot like you wouldn't believe behind my right ear. You can't say that, again, because you do it to yourself.
Ever since I was little, I've been ridiculed. I've had kids make fun of me. I've had, you know, the weird looks people get that you can tell they notice something's wrong with you when they're trying to figure out what.
Boyfriends, forget it. Nobody could touch me from the neck up. You know, intimacy was almost impossible.
I use this, this black crayon type thing to cover what I'm so ashamed of. First thing I wake up, I have to hide who I really am.
Hello, my name's Christina Pearson. I'm calling from TLC. I'm returning Rhonda's call. Hi, Rhonda? Rhonda, this is Christina Pearson with TLC. Hi, I'm pretty good. You had called last week about your daughter? Okay.
Christina Pearson is the founder of the Trichotillomania Learning Center, known as TLC, a nonprofit organization that helps people with hair pulling and similar problems. If you want to know about trichotillomania, you eventually call TLC. There aren't a lot of other options.
Okay, there is a psychologist that I think is starting a group for young girls. She is familiar with trichotillomania.
Before Christina started TLC out of a California bungalow in 1990, there was no way for people with trichotillomania to get information or connect with one another. Christina began bringing people together. She published a newsletter, organized a scientific advisory board, and created an annual weekend retreat.
We average about 100 new contacts a week. In fact, we just signed up a guy in Iraq.
TLC's primary mission is to provide accurate information to the thousands of trich sufferers and their families who call or visit the website every week, as well as the physicians and other professionals who treat them. I first called TLC 8 years ago and have been a volunteer ever since.
One of the best descriptions of trich I ever heard was a man who said to me, he said, you know, my compulsion to pull is like if somebody's thrown me into a swimming pool and I'm drowning and I'm struggling for air. That is how strong the impulses can feel. I've talked to smokers, I've talked to heroin addicts, I've talked to people who have stopped all kinds of things, and yet they've not been able to stop pulling out their hair. This is my head. This is a patch that I did 3 years ago. This is an example of what I can do in a very short period of time if I allow myself to go into the trick, you might say. Oh, this is a good picture. This is my dear friend Laura, who made these pictures available to let us see the severity of how one can pull. This is a very blurry picture, but this is an example of severe damage to the scalp. This is a picture that was taken, self-taken by a woman. She's holding her arms up with the camera, and as you can see, she's done a tremendous amount of damage on the crown of her head. And this is a classic example of pretty intense pulling.
Now, when you get pictures like these, do you react? Do you have a reaction to them now, or are you so used to seeing them?
You mean, do I have a reaction?
Yeah, because I do seeing them.
Well, I have a different reaction than most people. Because I have such a strong drive to let the world know the truth of how deeply this impacts people, when I see somebody who's willing to share the impact of their disorder, I think that sends a strong message. Because trichotillomania is in many ways a disorder of isolation.
That isolation is something I'm well equipped to understand, because my own trick was a shameful secret for almost 20 years. I can still remember my shock when I finally learned that other people shared this problem. Why would we all do this? Why couldn't we stop? And why, if 1 in 50 Americans had this problem, did no one seem to know about it? I decided to do what I could to break through that wall of isolation. I put out the word that I was looking for people who were brave enough to share their stories on camera, and I set out on a journey. I traveled to Winter Park, Florida to meet the first trickster willing to talk, a 17-year-old high school senior named Stephanie.
Once I really get to know somebody, I decide how I think they're going to take it before I tell them. I'm reasonably picky about who I tell. I have to be really, really close with them. There's maybe 8 people that I'm close enough with that know, besides like my family. I had very, very thick hair ever since I was, little. Long, blonde, beautiful, thick hair that I miss so much. But it's all gone now.
This is, Stephanie was about 10 in this one. And this is when her hair had really gotten very long like her sister's. Stephanie's senior picture. And this was the last professional picture that was taken before Stephanie started to pull. This was taken in her 7th grade year, and it was a couple months after that that we started to notice the spot on top where she started.
I swore that everyone was looking at me and everybody thought I was a freak, and some people were nice enough to tell me so. Some of the guys, especially in the lunchroom, which didn't help at all. And I would just go from class to class. I didn't talk, I didn't socialize, I didn't go out on the weekends, I didn't talk on the phone, I didn't do anything.
We were fortunate to find a wig that just fit in with what her hair looked like, and she's real picky about it, and every time she gets a new one, she spends about 45 minutes working on it.
Yeah.
She usually pulls from her wig, and so we still have to get a new one about every 3 or 4 months.
When I first started pulling my hair, I think I probably spent maybe an hour or 2 a day doing it, maybe more. Now it's really just when I'm falling asleep at night, so maybe 15 or 20 minutes, but the damage that you can do in 15 or 20 minutes of just idle pulling time is catastrophic.
She just is in a trance, is the best thing I can say about it. She is so into whether it's watching television or thinking about something, she's just almost in a very deep trance, and all of a sudden her hand goes up and she just really doesn't realize it until it's brought to her attention.
Say stop it, and immediately the hand goes back up, and you say her name again, and then it's a little rougher the second time, and watch a little television, you look over there and she's pulling again, and it's, you know, Stephanie, stop it.
My dad, it has totally changed our relationship. We were always very, very close. And when all that stuff happened, it pushed us apart quite a bit. He couldn't believe that there wasn't something that he could do or somewhere we could go or somebody that could tell us, do this and you'll be fine. And it's still not very easy for him to realize that there's not a cure, there's nothing that he can do to fix me.
Some of us, like Stephanie, pull without being aware of it. For Angela, a computer support specialist in Philadelphia, it's extremely deliberate.
The itch is something that a lot of us feel before we actually start pulling. Usually, it's a sort of slow burn that grows into a fire. So you start by saying, okay, if I can just get that one that's causing the problem, then everything will be fine. And you get what you think is the one. And then, no, that wasn't it. Let me try one more time. And the next thing you know, you have a spot. Or next thing you know, you've cleared off your entire eyelash. Or, and the same goes for a spot on your head. So I do have a little, like, bald spot right there. I don't know if you can see it from where I pull, and these eyelashes are thicker than these because I was working on those more recently. So we'll just hide that a little bit. When my hair's this short and I'm really into pulling, I'll even go and get tweezers. I'm one of the people with Trich that pulls from my eyelashes, my scalp, and my groin area. I used to be an eyebrow puller, but somehow I mastered that. So that's one thing down. Extra cream on my face. I can't really say what starts it off. I just want to see a follicle for some reason. So I pull and I see one, and it might be only part of a follicle, or it might be on a hair that's black or something, and I decide, well, I'll pull another one and see if I happen to find one that's gray or white, or has a bigger follicle or something like that.
It was how much hair could I get in a grab and a pull, and how big were the bulbs on the end, the roots, what color were they? Were they wet? Were they dry? Were they big? Were they small?
What intrigued me was that when I pulled my hair out, that there was a root, and that the root sometimes came out with a little bit of blood on the bottom of it. And that, whenever I had that, I would just look at it and I would just, it actually brought me relief. It's almost as if pulling my hair was pulling holes out of my head which was pulling anxiety out of my head. Every time I pulled the hair, I felt better.
Fewer than a quarter of people who pull hair just simply discard them quickly. Most people do something with those hairs or that interesting structure, the root of the hairs. Probably the part that's most shameful or embarrassing to the individuals is the fact that often something is done in the mouth with that hair. The hair may be wrapped around the tongue or pulled through the teeth, or pieces bitten off, often the root itself. Probably the most difficult to understand is the fact that some individuals actually prefer to swallow or ingest the entire hair. And that, for anybody who's ever gotten a hair in their food, will seem quite unusual. But it just shows, I think, the potential for human beings to develop attractions to great varieties of possibilities.
It never occurred to me to pull my head hair, let alone swallow it. My fingers were always drawn to my eyes, but only the top lashes feel good to pull. If I were to pull from my lower lid, it would hurt. Once I tried to train myself to pull my leg hair instead of my lashes, but it just hurt too much. I can't explain it. There seem to be such endless variations of preference and pattern. It's just one of the many mysteries of trick. In fact, the greater the expert, the less they claim to understand about trick.
We're really at the starting gate in terms of understanding trichotillomania. There are very few studies that have been done. So far, there are a few studies that have made us curious about whether there may be a genetic link in this disorder, but that awaits to be seen. It may be the case that people inherit a tendency to develop trichotillomania, and that depending upon their life experiences, they either do or do not develop it.
One of the things we know about trichotillomania is that it occurs in people from all walks of life, any type of person. There's no evidence that necessarily people are more nervous who pull their hair. We don't think there's any kind of deep-seated problem or unresolved Oedipal conflict or, potty training problems or anything like that. There is a lot of evidence, we think, that it's a neurobiological disorder. There have been some studies that have shown that there's a certain deep part of the brain called the putamen, which is involved in movement and other things, that is smaller in people with trichotillomania than those that don't have it.
On MRI brain scans, it seems to look similar to Tourette's, which is a motor tic disorder. On the other hand, it also shares a lot of features with obsessive compulsive disorder, but it doesn't meet all the criteria for that.
It's now thought to be related to OCD, but not one and the same, more like a distant cousin rather than an identical twin.
I think trichotillomania belongs in a class of its own. Right now it's placed under impulse control disorders, but doesn't really seem to belong with the other disorders that are in that category, like kleptomania or pathological gambling. It doesn't seem to have anything in common with those. So who knows where it should belong.
Our society has a deep belief in the virtue of self-control. We fear that without it, man would be little better than beast. Yet our bodies often seem to have minds of their own, and we're finding that simple habits aren't as simple as we think. If you bite your nails or chew your cuticles, crack your knuckles, bite your cheeks, pick, scratch, or twirl, you may think of it as just a nervous habit. But if you want to stop and can't, you've got what psychologists call a body focus disorder. You're one of us. Nowadays, it seems, we blame more and more of our bad behavior on our genes. We can't control our overeating, our gambling, our drinking, our rage. Are we just crybabies who won't take responsibility for our own actions? Why can't we just buckle down and pull ourselves together? Is everything about us already programmed at birth? Or is there really such a thing as free will?
This is Terry Ann at the age of 4. And this is her with her little Gilligan hat on. We bought her that hat because all of her hair on both sides and the back was gone, except that little patch of hair that was in the front. She's had trichotillomania just as long as she's had hair. You know, she was just diagnosed at 18 months. But it's been, you know, ever since she's had hair.
Terry Ann and her family live in rural Indiana. She's 5 now, and she's by no means the youngest hair puller out there. The earliest reported age for trick onset is about 4 months.
She did mostly in her sleep, because a lot of times it was done in her sleep.
Literally while she was sleeping?
While she was sleeping, yeah. We usually try to replace it with yarn. Try to trick her. It works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't.
Excuse you. Say excuse me. When she was bald-headed, she was searching hairbrushes. Anything that she could get with hair in it, she had to have it. We were through Barbie dolls, baby dolls. In one incident, we were riding down the road. She was about 2 years old. And she was throwing a fit in the back seat because she wanted hair. And that's all she kept saying is, I want hair, I want hair, I want hair.
Daddy.
So I just went and pulled about 4 or 5 little strands up out of my hair, or ever how much I could, you know, give her, and reach back there in the back seat of the car and give it to her. And she just stuck that thumb and just played with it in between her fingers.
People were laughing at her, looking at her, and staring at her. So?
So you don't mind that?
It's okay if they look at me.
She's okay with it, but I'm not. And I want to protect her, just like any mom would want to protect any of their kids. She's not deaf. She hears people talking about her. She's not deaf.
I don't specifically remember the first time I pulled my eyelashes. What I do remember is sitting in the playroom, I think I was 8 or 9, and playing with my eyelid, pulling the lashes so the eyelid would pop away from my eye and make a little sucking noise. Just the kind of little thing kids do. You know how memory is. I remember a lash or two coming out, but I didn't think about it particularly. It started in that kind of a game-like way, seemingly not important at all. Soon the game grew totally out of control. When I ran out of eyelashes, my fingers moved to my brows. It doesn't show up too well in the photos, but there were many times when my eyes were completely bald. I wore long bangs to hide my face. If anyone mentioned the word eyelashes, I jumped. This is me and my sister Vicky. When she started to pull her eyelashes, I was sure she had learned it from me. Once, I found a notebook paper with a row of eyelashes lined up across the top. They weren't mine. We never talked about it.
When people start pulling their hair, it can be a tiny little prick, like a child saying, in 8th grade, they told me to pluck a hair and look at it under the microscope, and God, I went home that night and just pulled and pulled and pulled. We have people who tell us that.
I don't know if this really happened. I was in, like, 2nd grade, I think, and I heard my mom and grandma say, if you find an eyelash on your face and you blow it away, your wish will come true, and you make a wish. And I really wanted wishes back then, so I started pulling it.
I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I had head lice, and I was laying on the counter, and my dad was picking the nits out, basically, and that sensation kind of stuck with me, and that's when it really started. Is shortly after that, I was, you know, trying to get that sensation of what he was doing when he was pulling it.
Some people think that hair pulling is part of an old instinct, a grooming instinct that goes a little astray, you might say. I think it's part of this loading of nerve endings on the scalp and the way they're tied in with certain centers in the brain, that's my presumption, that make it very special.
I believe that the body is craving or requiring something that the hair pulling is satisfying.
It's also extremely interesting. You can play with hair. I mean, it's not like anything else. That, you know, I don't know anybody who didn't at one time, female-wise at least, play with their hair, twirl it. And I don't think there's anything else you can do that is so fascinating for those times that we're bored or whatever.
It's amazing to me why hair can do so much. The pulling of hair can provide great deal of pleasure for some. It can relieve stress in others. And more. What is it about hair that makes it so capable of fulfilling so many needs in individuals? That's a mystery, I think, to me.
One way we can tell that hair is really important to people is by how much time and money they spend on it. And it's obviously a multi-billion-dollar industry. People spend enormous amounts of time dyeing their hair, washing their hair, getting their hair cut. And that's just the hair on your head. Our modern society, where women are encouraged to pay a lot of attention to their hair, that's really in line with most of world history. Hair, as a beautifying agent, has had tremendous importance for humans in many civilizations. It is associated with sexual power, with virility, as in the story of Samson, who lost his power after his hair was cut. Loose flowing hair, especially on a woman, seems to be perceived frequently as symbolic of sexual license. You find both the religious authority and the state authority very concerned with controlling people's hair. Under some circumstances, the cutting or shaving of hair implies that the individual is being disciplined or subordinated to some larger authority. After Paris was liberated from the Nazis, many French women who had slept with Germans had their heads forcibly shaved and were marched through the street. Hair is so associated with femininity and with beauty. It really becomes almost an unspeakable thing for women when they have hair loss.
I wasn't part of the family anymore. As long as I pulled my hair, I had to stay at home and do chores while they went out and had fun as a family get-together because I wasn't good enough to be seen with my family.
You're constantly thinking about it. How am I going to wear my hair? What if I can't get that spot covered?
It was just easier to shave my head than try and work up a hairstyle.
One person called me and said she hadn't been to a hairdresser in 17 years. I was shocked to find out that people had never had their hair cut in their lives professionally.
Anytime I even went from my bedroom into the shower room, I wore a scarf so that nobody would ever see my head. Nobody ever saw my head for most of those years.
Sister Barbara called me after seeing a notice about my film in the TLC newsletter. Though she's the youngest nun in her order, Sister Barbara is in charge of running their hospice. The other nuns don't know about her problem. her superiors worried that if she told the others, they might lose confidence in her authority.
I first started pulling my hair when I was 18. I could spend between 3 and 6 hours a night. I lost a lot of sleep pulling my hair. But most often it was 3 hours, but sometimes it was 6. I remember thinking, this is not normal what I'm doing. And when I'd get done pulling, there'd be a pile of hair on the floor, and I would go pick it up in my hands to throw it away. And I felt like an animal. I did bring it to confession because I felt it was very sinful, because I'm damaging my body, you know, so I considered it a sin. But it was very difficult to explain that to a priest. So they just say 3 Hail Marys, or if it was real bad, say a whole decade, you know. It interfered with my relationships, both with women and with men. I dated a man in college for about 3 years, but he really didn't know what was wrong with me. At the prime of your life, when you should be in relationships, I just shied away from them. Shied away from anybody knowing even about me. It wasn't really my decision. I would say that God was calling me to the kind of life where I could give him my life and serve other people. It happened that I received that call from God around the same time that I was still pulling hair out of my head. Probably, if I didn't have the hair problem, I would have maybe entered a community that didn't wear a veil, or that was not in the habit. I don't know. I know that I remembered, oh, now good, now I can really cover it up. So I went to the convent and put a veil over my head.
You know, I used it as like a red badge of courage, you know, this is me, this is what I have trichotillomania, you know, and I'm sorry if you don't like it, I'm sorry that you have to deal with it, but you don't have to deal with it like I do. So, you know, I kind of have a chip on my shoulder about it.
We only have estimates of the proportion of men versus women, but right now the best guess is that it's about 9 to 1 female to male. That proportion is questionable, and has been questioned by certain researchers who believe, for example, that men may have a form of trichotillomania in which they pull from the beard and mustache, and if it gets too bad, they just shave it all off. So that there may be some men who are escaping detection by that option that isn't easily available to women.
Yeah, I told Jeff that I had trick, had to wear a Burger King or something, wasn't it?
However many men pull their hair, it's certain that even fewer of them talk about it than women do. So I was surprised when I heard from Jimmy, a pump engineer and diehard Red Raiders fan from West Texas.
Billy was the first guy that ever knew that I had trichotillomania.
After a lifetime of secrecy, Jimmy was suddenly ready to tell the whole world about his trick.
What's the camera for, man? They're doing a deal on me on trichotillomania. Yeah. Hey, I didn't tell you about that, Garland. It's,
well, you can tell me one of these days.
All right.
Check it out.
Basically, my day starts out with me, you know, crawling out of bed and, you know, staggering to the bathroom and pulling for about a half hour. I'm usually very much alone when I do this. If anybody sees me, it's by accident.
Jimmy usually gets up last because he takes the longest, and I have to be out of the room so that he can have full use of it.
So how much time total do you spend pulling your hair?
Oh, generally about 30 minutes in the morning, give or take. Usually when I get home, sometimes during the day, I'll pull for a couple about 10, 15 minutes, then, I'll pull at night. But I mean, I've stayed in here for, I think I had one bout when I pulled all my beard and mustache out. And I believe I was in here for about 7 or 8 hours straight. No food, no lunch, no breakfast, nothing.
I don't time it. I don't pay attention to it because I'm so busy on my own. But I do, when I have to come in, I do know that he hadn't shaved yet and he hadn't showered yet. And I say, Jimmy, it's, 7:16, you better, move it along. And he grumbles and then he says, okay, one more hair.
I've got so many gray hairs now, and every one of them I want to pull out. And I'll go through and I'll find a nest of them that need to go. So I'll sit here until, like right here, there's about 4 or 5 that need to go. 1. Yeah, see, now that's what I hate, when you get a good one and you pull it and it breaks and you don't get the root out. That really bites. Any given week, it would be somewhere between 12 to 17 hours a week that I devote to this. It's not fun. Leaves you little time for other things, like family or job or hobbies or sleep. My 2 boys, they just don't have time with Dad. And, they generally like to see me when I come in. And they both run to me and say, Dad, you're home, And I'm like, okay, boys, hug them real quick, gotta go. And I'm like trying to peel them off so that I can go and do what I need to do.
I think the unfortunate situation is that most people who have trichotillomania probably are not within reach of adequate treatment, and professionals really have let them down. We hear too many stories of persons who have gone for help and faced the blank stares or puzzled looks or twisted faces of professionals who simply couldn't comprehend that this individual was doing that to themselves.
There's a girl that called me last week that had seen 15 doctors over the last number of years, and they never once mentioned the word trichotillomania, and I was like, were they doctors? That's really sad.
One guy was like, I don't know where it came from, but he was like talking about my mom, and he's like, your mom seems like a very stressful person. She'd make me want to pull out my hair. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? So we fired him.
I put bandages over my fingers. Tell me stop pulling. That really didn't help because I still managed to pull. I put my hands in gloves. I pulled them off and then I pulled.
I wore gloves and that didn't work, so I switched to mittens. Hats, toboggan caps, shower caps, swim caps.
I tried making deals with myself. I tried giving myself rewards. I tried punishing myself. I remember deciding that I would punch myself every time I pulled a hair. And so I did. I would pow. Not very useful. I certainly tried restraining myself. I also tried drinking myself into oblivion, which I found to be quite useful. And ultimately, by the time I was 30, I was drinking tremendous amounts of gin every single night to blackout because if I could drink fast enough where I would black out and pass out, I would not pull my hair. In Alcoholics Anonymous, there's a wonderful saying that, one drink is too many and 1,000 is not enough. Well, any hair puller knows that one hair is too many and 1,000 is not enough.
These are some of my books. Some of my books are over there. This is my TV.
Though trick can start at any age, the greatest number of people start around puberty.
This is my stuffed animals. I have another huge bag in the closet and another bag in another room.
12-year-old Molly had only just been diagnosed with trick a few months before I visited with her and her mother on Manhattan's Upper West Side. She was just entering 7th grade.
I'm a little antsy because, I haven't been to school for a while. I don't know because I was sick for the last month of school. So I don't know, and I'm kind of bald, so it's like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't usually turn lights on. Snicky's kind of gotten me used to nocturnal stuff.
Molly's 12, and she's hitting adolescence with a vengeance.
This is my prized piece of art. My mom makes me do a lot of art stuff, yeah.
She has something called attention deficit disorder, actually ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. She's always had a hard time sitting still.
I don't care. Snicky loves being in
She's
here.
an extremely caring, extremely giving person, very generous, often effervescent. She wakes up in the morning singing.
Oh, I want a close-up of the education victim poster. I love that education.
She is hypersensitive to lots of things, hypersensitive to death.
Snickers. Sit. Lay down. Yeah. He's like just a little disgruntled.
Actually, when she was younger, she was hypersensitive to light, smell, and sound. And she used to run around the first grade classroom and the second grade classroom telling the teachers to please turn the lights down and please quiet the class down because it was too noisy.
What you have to try to do, just press X again.
Okay.
Whenever
She plays a lot of video games.
Just shoot at the ducks.
We like those because it keeps her hands busy, except that she's now learned to do it one-handed.
Go up a little. You've gotten half ducks. That's really good for a first try.
Thank you. I'm actually very, very worried about this year
No, not that
because in 7th grade is when girls get really mean to each other. And I expect it'll be a really hard year.
How long have you been pulling your hair now?
6 months to something like that. Maybe 9 or a year, somewhere in that range.
Do you think?
Well, actually, now that I remember it, when I was littler, in 3rd or 4th grade, I pulled out a huge chunk of my hair, and it was noticeably really bald, and I said my hair got stuck in something. I now just remember that, so I must have I just didn't do it as much or realize I did it. It was like a big, fistful. I don't know why I did it.
Well, why do you think you're doing it more now?
Probably because, I don't know, as you get older, I mean, don't you think you were more free and sort of free-going when you were 5 than when you were 11? Like, when you were 5, you were so happy. Nothing really affected you that much. I mean, it was just like you got hurt, you cried, but you got over it pretty quickly. It's nothing like long-term. Is what happened to me. I was just free-going. And now you're bound down with burdens like worrying and 9/11 and stuff like that.
Control is a big issue for me. I still often will say, stop, Molly, please stop. Or, I'll grab her hands or I'll do something like that as if will somehow train her, as if it will be useful. And maybe it is useful in that she stops for that moment. It's really painful as a mother to watch your kid and not be able to help her.
It didn't used to be important to me, my parents, because I thought people wouldn't care, but people do care once you get older and stuff. And I mean, I know it's not a good thing that people care. I mean, you want to look acceptable, not so people cringe when they look at you.
What is it that concerns you most about Molly's trick?
That it will impede her integrating into the world at a social level, even more than the other hurdles that she has to deal with. And that it will make her unhappy. I'm sorry if I cry. I just don't want my child to be unhappy.
Who do you think suffers more with the trichotillomania, your mom or you?
I honestly don't know. I hope she doesn't suffer more than me because, I mean, I don't want to bring that upon her. I really don't. But I can't control that.
Molly had one advantage over me. She found out early the name of her problem. When I was 12, trich wasn't even in the books. Like most people with trich, I struggled with my problem alone for years. Throughout high school, my eyebrows and eyelashes came and went. I was in therapy for a while, but it didn't help with my pulling. My sister was offered therapy too, but she didn't want it. She was always more relaxed about her trich than I was. It was milder than mine, and it just never bothered her that much. One day at college, I opened a letter from my mother with a clipping in it. It was about trichotillomania. It was the first time I had ever seen the word, and I think I must have stopped breathing for a few minutes. Eventually, I wrote away to TLC for information, and Christina's response changed my life. Because it was only when I found out that other people did it, and that it had a name, that it started to become something that I might, someday, be able to talk about.
There was a column in the Dear Abby about a woman who had pulled her hair, and she had mentioned that there's a place that you can write to get help. I wrote to TLC in Santa Cruz and got information on trichotillomania, and from there I learned that there was a clinic that offered a week's intensive group therapy for this. And so I asked permission of the Mother General. There were beautiful women there, beautiful women that you'd never guess that they would be pulling hair out of their head, airline stewardesses. And it just, for me, I just broke down immediately. That whole first day I cried. I couldn't stop crying because finally I knew that it wasn't just me, that it happens to other people too. And when I saw a girl there, 18, it reminded of me when I was 18. And I thought, gee, if only I had known when I was 18 how to get help, I would have lived a completely different life. I would have made different choices in my life, and I would have had different experiences.
Everything I do is in spite of it, just to prove it that I'm winning. I'm beating it, it's not beating me, and I'm normal. I'm just living my life like I would if I didn't have it. And I've been happier since I've done that. I started water polo, and I started making friends, and I felt like I had a place where I fit in. You know, they understood, and they kind of knew that I wore a wig. They didn't really know why, but they knew that, you know, I did, and they knew that it wasn't life-threatening, that I was okay. For a long time, I did think of myself as Stephanie, the girl who wears the wig. And now it's almost 90% Stephanie, just Stephanie, the girl that wants to be a teacher and plays water polo and loves her dog probably too much, and just like every other teenager. I have no idea what it'll take for me to get my hair back, but I know that whatever it is, I'll do it. And I'll take care of it one day at a time, and I'll beat it.
We used to think of trichotillomania as sort of a hopeless disorder, as we thought of many other disorders were hopeless, such as obsessive-compulsive disorder. And certainly, people who pull their hair tend to feel kind of hopeless about it because they have tried and tried and tried to stop, usually, and have not succeeded. So they kind of say, if this hasn't worked, nothing will. But what is really amazing is that when using the right tools, many, many people get either completely better or partially better enough that it's a tolerable problem for them.
For those of us lucky enough to find help, the three most effective weapons in our arsenal are support groups, medication, and behavior therapy. None of these is the magic cure we all wish for.
There's no one treatment that treats all hair pullers. For some people, medications do help reduce the urges, but they don't totally eliminate them. And also, in some cases, when medications have initially been effective, they lose their efficacy over time. Behavior therapy is probably the most promising treatment that we have at the moment. In behavioral treatment, you help the individual to understand the triggers for their pulling, and then we start to talk about coping mechanisms that they can use in different situations.
I've got my knitting needles, my yarn, I have handheld games, I've got my rubber bands on my wrist I can take off, and if I'm feeling stressed, I can like stretch them out. I've got stress balls, koosh balls, everything.
When people come into treatment, I tell them that trichotillomania may wax and wane over time, and that my hope is that we will be able to identify strategies that they can use so that they can reduce their pulling and minimize the negative impact that it has in their life.
I went to my first retreat in 1994. I've been to about 7 of them now. It's an event that TLC holds every year, a 4-day series of workshops and hanging out. Tricksters come to share tips, hear lectures, and consult with the top treatment providers in the country, often without their camouflage. Molly went to her first retreat that autumn. Christina was there too. She had lost weight, got a new haircut, and hadn't pulled her hair in a year. She and the others welcomed Molly like a sister.
How is it being at the retreat? Have you met other young people?
Yeah. It's nice because you don't really have to go through explaining why do you do this.
Do kids ever pick on you for pulling your hair?
Sometimes.
Yeah? And how do you take care of yourself around that? What do you do?
Sometimes I ignore it. Sometimes I tell them that I do have trichotillomania, and they're just like, yeah, sure. You
So
just made that up.
So right, they don't want to believe you.
Yeah, but so I got a medical dictionary.
Good, smart.
You know, when you get older, things change a little bit. They did for me anyway. So what I try to do now, and I've been pulling for like a long time, like Christina, is I try not to put myself in situations where I know I might pull.
Right.
Well, the problem with me is out at school, you can't really change your environment.
That's right. That's true.
That's true.
Okay, well, what can you change? Is there anything you can change? You know, life is, I don't know where we get the idea that life is going to be easy. Life is actually very difficult a lot of the time. You know, I've been doing this for 10 years, and for me, the magic is in knowing that lives are transformed. And when somebody comes to me and they send me a card or a letter or a picture or a notice that they're getting married or they're going to law school or whatever, it makes me feel that we're reaching out. We're doing the job of laying down the railroad tracks so that when answers do come, we have the ability to move that information to those that need it.
I'd love for everybody in the outside world just to be able to accept it. You know, it's something that happens, and sometimes they grow out, sometimes they may not. You know, and if she does, wonderful. If she doesn't, so be it. I'm still gonna love her anyway, no matter what.
Sometime after I left college, my pulling started to abate without my really being aware of it. My long bangs, which I'd always worn to camouflage my eyebrows, were growing out for the first time. Suddenly, I couldn't remember why I had always worn them. It's still a mystery to me. Yet even today, the urge to pull never feels too far from the surface. My little civil war continues, but I'm much better trained now. I arm myself with Band-Aids, attend my weekly support group meeting, talk back to the trickster in my head. I know the terrain better and win most of the battles, but I still dream of quiet hands.